Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hey everybody, welcome to a special episode of Tales from the Fandom. Today's episode is an episode that I was actually supposed to have released a few weeks ago, and yet here it is right now. And it is an Ask Me Anything episode. I sourced my questions on Twitter and on Facebook, and so I've got a bunch to answer, and I wanted to thank everybody for sending in their questions, because I love to do these every so often, just to get some new, fresh perspectives or answers, or just putting myself out there a little bit more so people can get to know me, and it's really fun, and I love to do them. So be on the lookout in a couple months for when I maybe ask for more questions. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, my first question is from Justin Zenger from the Zeng This Podcast. And he asked, is there a fandom or nerdy thing that you wish you got into sooner? And of course, there's a lot of things that I wish I had gotten into sooner. I think the two of them recently that I wish I'd gotten into sooner is Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Parks and Rec. Both of those shows are so wonderful and amazing, and their characters are great. The stories are wonderful, and it's just so much fun. Like those shows are just so much fun. Between Parks and Rec, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and The Office, those three shows are really my go-to shows when I need a pick-me-up or when I need just to have something in the background. I will put those shows on first and foremost, and I really wish, especially with Parks and Rec, that I had watched it when it was actually on the air instead of waiting on Netflix, because it would have been a lot of wonderful conversations with people talking about that show. Daniel Stewart from at Tabletop Tapes asked two questions. So the first one is, what is a tabletop role-playing game that I've always wanted to play or run? So I guess there's a lot of answers there, and I tried to boil it down and get just maybe one or two. It's really tough. I would love to play a Call of Cthulhu game. I would love to play a Blades in the Dark game. I would love to play a Masks Next Generation game, or New Generation. I'm not sure which they go with. It's either Next Generation or New Generation. And there's just so much more, like, especially with Savage Worlds and the way that they have their different settings that you can play Savage Worlds in, like 50 Fathoms, Deadlands. I really just would love to play pretty much anything. I'm obviously more experienced with Dungeons and Dragons or Star Wars or Vampire, so I'd love to play something that's just different and out there, and I'd really love to try one of those games out. Now, Daniel asked, what's your favorite or least favorite part of doing your podcast? Specifically with Tales from the Five Nations, which he's asking about, which is our Eberron Savage Worlds actual play podcast. My favorite part of doing Tales from the Five Nations is being able to get together with friends and play tabletop role-playing games. I don't get a lot of time to do that. It's actually the only time I get to do that is with that group at this point. We started running a family game, but because we have so much stuff to do around the house or with the kids, we don't always get to play D&D. And so that is really the only opportunity for me to play is with the actual play. So that's my favorite thing. My least favorite thing on my podcast is listening to my voice. I hate listening to my voice to the point where I speed up the audio to about 1.75 to 1.8 times speed, and I edit with chipmunk voices, because that is the only way I can really tolerate listening to my podcast, listening to my voices, and also helps just speed up everything, so that way I'm not spending hours and hours and hours on editing. Isabella Jones at Isakills, Isakills. She's from the Dice for Brains podcast. She asked, how can fandoms be better? that is a loaded question. Especially with all that's going on right now, whether it's the Star Wars fandom, cosplay. I mean, there's just so much going on about just negativity, attacking the actors, attacking directors, because it's not the way that you wanted it to work out. Therefore, it's bad and you must lash out. Honestly, I think people need to understand that it's not being made for them. And I say them as in, they're not going to you and saying, we need to make this Star Wars movie, what would you like in it? They're making it to fit their narrative, their bigger picture, their story. Are there things that you'd like to see in it? Of course. And it sucks when it's not in there. It sucks when they change things. It sucks when it just doesn't break your way. But you know what? That's all right. You still have the things that you fell in love with. No one's asking you to love something if you don't like it. You don't have to like it. But you also don't have the permission to lash out at people or to be rude to people. And that's the thing that I really hate, is the rudeness that I see online towards the actors and directors and writers. Because you know what? They're doing their jobs and they've done them. Whether you like it or not is a different story. And honestly, if everyone just understood that everyone is a person in front of the computer, behind the computer, in front of the camera, like, they're just playing characters. It's just something. And if, again, I know, like, I love my fandoms too. I love Lord of the Rings. I love Star Wars. I didn't like some of the stuff, but I'm not kicking and screaming and crying about it. I like what I like. I'll rewatch what I like to rewatch, and I don't have to watch something if I don't like it. And I think it can be people's energies can be put into more constructive ways, and really that's pretty much, I think, is a good starting point, is trying to do something in a more constructive way. Tracy at TracySaur, TracySaur, from the Broadswords asked, what was your first fandom and how did it affect you growing up? Well, I have two first fandoms. They're the ones that I connected with initially: Lord of the Rings and Star Trek. And I will say that I was not into Star Wars immediately. I actually had nightmares about Star Wars when I was a younger kid, but it was based on the toys. Like, it's a really weird story. Maybe I'll save that one for another time. But Lord of the Rings, I remember getting the box set when I was probably 11 or 12 at the time, and I fell in love with it. I devoured those books. They're a little bit older for me. Like, The Hobbit was perfect, but it took me a few readings to, like, really understand what was going on and get to know the characters. And with Star Trek, I got into that about 7th grade or 8th grade, right when Next Generation was coming on and Star Trek VI Undiscovered Country was airing. And for those, I mean, it's always been with me. It's always stuck with me through my life, is those two fandoms. Like, I will always love those fandoms. And especially with Star Trek, it just gives you that hope and optimism that things will be better in the future. And even if we are currently in the darkest timeline right now, things will hopefully get better than what we're experiencing. And I do see it, those glimpses of hope and change and everything else, and I just hope it continues that trend of change in the world that we need. Joey, also Gnome, at Nomadic, he's one of my players on Tales from the Five Nations, and he runs Hexes and Bows, asked, is there a fandom you're a bit shy to admit it? Is there a fandom you're a bit shy to admit you like? Oh my gosh. I used to be embarrassed about it, but at this point, like, I'm almost 40 years old at this point. I don't really care. And a lot of it is just a lot of fun watching it with the kids. But my daughter got into the new My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. And I thought it was stupid until I started watching it. And it is amazing. And I have no regrets and no shame saying that I love My Little Pony. And if that makes me a brony, so be it. However, I think it's a really good show that a lot of people don't give it a chance. And yeah, I think more people should definitely check it out. And the last question is from Elise. You can find her on Twitter at DND Elise. And she asked, how did you get started working in podcasts? What got you interested in gaming? What started me into podcasts is back in 2015, I had talked with one of my closest friends, Jaquel, and I said I really wanted to start doing something for myself. I wanted to start doing just something. Like, I couldn't get out and role play. I couldn't get out and really interact with people because the kids were still youngish and they had full schedules, and my wife has a full schedule. But I said, I could do a podcast. It's at home. I'll figure something out. Black Friday came around that year. They had the Blue Yeti mics on sale. I picked one up. And then it took a couple months to decide what I wanted to do. And everyone loves talking about what they're into. TV shows, movies, comics, cosplay, anything. So that is how Tales from the Fandom evolved, is through that. Tales from the Five Nations, on the other hand, was I wanted to roleplay, and I couldn't again do it because the our store down the street closed, and then the closest one to us is about 20 minutes away, give or take. But their Adventure League ends at the time when I would be able to actually start. So that's how Five Nations got started, is I wanted to have an Eberron game, and I made it happen, whether it's me, being a player. Maybe in the future I'd love to do some more podcasts. I've actually got a whole bunch of different ideas, but it's all about time, and I don't really have a lot more. As far as what got me interested in gaming, my mom, back when I was in middle school, probably about middle school, she had one of those little booths in the mall, and she did little bears, and you'd buy a little tchotchke family of bears and whatever. But that's not the point. The point is, when she was working at the mall, my sister and I, or me alone, we would go up to the mall and hang out the entire day, which at a certain point you get really bored of being in the mall. But they had a B. Dalton and a Walden books, and I was already into sci-fi and fantasy. I was into a lot of the Star Wars books at the time, Star Trek books, Piers Anthony, Anne McCaffrey, and I somehow, because the science fiction fantasy section was right next to the role-playing game section, and I still remember my first purchases from that section was the West End Games D6 Star Wars, and then the Complete Book of Elves and the Complete Book of Dwarves, and that was it. After reading through that, I knew I wanted to roleplay. I knew I wanted to game. I tried live action out in high school, but it didn't work out. I'm not a social person at all. I can't really put myself out there. But that first year of college away from home, which was in 1999, I found a great gaming group. I got started on 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons. Did the transition to 3rd edition once Wizards picked it up. Played Vampire the Masquerade and Mage and Star Wars, and just it was so much fun. And really, those books, the artwork, the stories, that's what got me into tabletop gaming. And those are all the questions. So I guess I can wrap up a few things with, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, which I don't really use Instagram too much anymore, but I'm going to try to start using it a little bit more. But you can find us, mostly I'm on Twitter these days at TalesFTFandom, or you can find the Eberron Savage Worlds campaign at TalesFT5 and Nations. And you can find both of those podcasts on any of your favorite podcast apps, iTunes and Spotify, iHeartRadio. And if you cannot find it somewhere, just let me know and I will make sure to get it available on whichever streaming service you desire. We do have a Patreon to support both of the podcasts. As I always try and say, it's not a requirement. I just appreciate people listening. But if you're interested in supporting the podcast, getting access to early episodes, getting access to some swag for free, whether it's ebooks or t-shirts or something else in between, you can check us out on Patreon. The link is going to be in the show notes. And that is it. So I hope you enjoyed listening to these answers, and I will be back on August 6th for the first episode of the August episodes with Angela, aka Kiss Kiss Cosplay. That is it. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you all for your questions, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.